Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. You are looking at um, a machine that I have been asked to overhaul by a client. This is not one of mine, and I thought it was kind of a good place to talk about um, the hobby of vintage sewing machine restoration or fully overhauling them, whatever term you like to use. And I wanted to kind of share this with you because a number of people are getting interested in restoring vintage sewing machines, and it's so wonderful to hear that. There are so many machines, there could be, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times the number of people who do this, and we still couldn't get to them all. So it's so exciting to hear this. If you are thinking about uh, wanting to learn to restore sewing machines, vintage sewing machines specifically, uh, I just thought I'd talk about what might be a good first machine to take on. Or it could be that maybe you're not wanting to do the whole restoration thing for a hobby. You just want a specific machine, and either you can't find anyone who will restore it for you, or you don't want to pay. You want to do it yourself, and that is exciting. There are many choices. In the vintage sewing machine world, I have been often asked, hey, what's the best? Who made the best machine? And there really is no one answer to that question. And it's not a cop out. It literally is. There were lots of great brands and many great models within each brand, and a few dog models within those, right? Even Singer, who made incredible sewing machines, lots of different fantastic models. Even they had a few that were less than stellar. But so you have many to choose from. But when it comes to, if you were to ask, hey, what do you think is a good sewing machine to begin the hobby of sewing machine restoration, or if you want to work on your own machine, what might you choose? You could certainly choose machines like European multi-stitch. I've done recent videos on German Pfaffs and Swiss Berninas. They are wonderful. There's nothing that prevents you from learning how to restore them, so I don't want to suggest that you can't. But if you're just starting out, you might find it more rewarding to begin as I did. I started with a Singer, not this particular model, and it was a straight stitch machine. So that would be, I guess, number one. Choose a straight stitch, a dedicated straight stitch only machine. These machines are, depending on the brand, all machines can need repair. Okay, just because it's a straight stitcher doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But the mechanisms and the drivetrain in the machine are simpler than they are on machines that do zigzag, and then you add in decorative stitches and automatic stitches, whether it's with cams or not. Those machines are more complex, and they have a lot more restoration points that you have to coordinate, because you can get one part of a complex machine restored, but if it relies on another part that's not working, it can be frustrating sometimes. But if you are looking for a machine to begin with, this is one of them. It's not the only one, but a straight stitch machine. So it's, let's talk about number one, choose a straight stitch. Number two, you want to choose a brand that is easy to get parts for, and you don't have to pay a lot of money for the parts, and they're not hard to find. And honestly, when it comes to restoring sewing machines from the vintage era, whether they are straight stitch or multi-stitch capable, I have to say that when you look at across the board, almost every model, the Singer brand is my favorite. I don't mean it is my favorite sewing machine brand, or necessarily should it be yours, but in terms of working on them, the quality is there, the quality of the hardware is there, and you can find parts. I'll give you a for instance. This machine was missing when I picked it up. It was missing its throat plate. It's bobbin plate, right here, which slides. And I was inspecting it further because I'm getting ready to start work on it. And the check spring is here, but the check spring, I'm going to go in and look a little deeper, but I think the check spring is broken. It has, the check spring has a certain shape, and the spring is here, but the little loop that we need to get the thread into is gone. It is broken. And Singer springs were made of very high quality steel. I've had 100-year-old springs that worked fine, but we need a check spring for this machine. And believe it or not, as old as this is, I believe this is early 1900s treadle machine. It I should be able to find a replacement check spring, right? So there's that. That alone should be comforting. You've bought this machine, you want to restore it. It's like, oh no, where am I going to find a part? Some vintage sewing machines, particularly European brands, but others, depending on how many of them were made and how many years they were made, they can be tough, and you can spend a long time and not a small amount of money looking for parts. But you should not generally, there will always be exceptions, but generally you won't have that problem with Singers. So when it comes to the brand of sewing machine that I would recommend starting with, if you have a choice, if you don't, that's okay. Choose Singer, straight stitch, dedicated straight stitch. Now it doesn't have to be the 15 class. You'll see the upper thread tension discs are on the left side. You could choose others. There are other Singer models. Keep in mind that if you have a machine that has a top-loading bobbin or a class 66 drop-in bobbin, those machines have a slightly more complex shuttle assembly that you can disassemble, and you can certainly do it. I've shown you guys in videos I've done on Singer 99, Singer 66, Singer 185J, which I think that's the one I showed how to replace the little, remember there's an oiling felt in those, not in this model. But I really like the 15 class because it was built for decades, 60, 70 years in some form or another. You can still get bobbin cases. Now, mine has its bobbin case, and as far as I can tell, it's still pretty snappy. I'm going to go through and clean it, make sure it's still functioning. We've even got one of the original bobbins, which I need to be able to test. I don't know how old this thread is, but we'll check that out. So I'm looking at this machine again. I did kind of a cursory glance of it. I noticed that we're going to have to go in and clean and lubricate the stitch length adjuster because right now I'm not getting any engagement with it. I have to find out what's going on with that. If you look over here, this is the bobbin winder, and I've demonstrated this on one of my machines before. I love these bobbin winders. They're kind of fun. And there's a spring here which still snaps back wonderfully strong, so we don't need to replace that. There's a spring here that I think works, but there's a lot of old dust and oil and goo that's causing the bobbin winding device it's not moving the way it should. So we're going to take all this apart. We'll probably take this little cover off and get in there. We got to do some serious cleaning. We still have our wonderful original, I believe, spool pin, so we don't need that. Let's take a look. I'll move this around, kind of turn it around for you guys. Everything is here. We have our hand wheel. There is a belt here, and it's not broken, but I'm going to replace it. This is a rubber stretch belt. Actually, it is dry rotted. I can see cracks in it, but I don't like these. If you guys are familiar with stretch belts, I think I did a video on belts. And people would sometimes buy a little package of one or sometimes several stretch belts. These were created with the idea that they are because they stretch, they're adjustable. You can see me pulling down here. You guys can see me. I can actually stretch this. Belts normally do not stretch and shouldn't, but you can see this is like a giant thick rubber band. And because it stretches, it's flexible, and you can put it on lots of different sewing machine models with different lengths between the pulley of the motor and the I don't even know why this is on here, because this came out of a treadle, but at some point somebody put this on, and I don't know if they couldn't have put a motor on because there's no way to mount it. But anyway, that's part of the mystery. You never know. You'll get all sorts of things when you buy a vintage machine. But the point of this stretch belt is I don't like them. And the reason, you say, well, it's easy to adjust and it fits many sizes, no problem. The problem here is that when you get a belt that stretches, part of the power of your sewing machine is being absorbed by this flexibility on the belt, and you lose power. I don't like them. I don't think they work all that great, and you end up losing power unnecessarily. So I don't like these. You can get lots of replacement sewing machine belts. In this case, we're going to be using a leather treadle belt. But anyway, just thought I would mention that. We'll try to polish this up. This is the original. Whoops! This is the original That is the original clutch knob and washer for when you want to disengage the machine and wind a bobbin. Okay, what we got on the back? We got a lot of dust, and that's fine. When you get an older machine like this is not unusual. We'll take this off. And some of the 15 classes have rear plates like this that are they're very ornate. This one is kind of more of a simple one, which is kind of cool. We'll be polishing that up. That's not a big deal. There's a lot of dust and dirt in here. And so I don't know, this may have sat dormant for a long time. Who knows? I don't know all the history. Of course, we'll be cleaning up the body and the finish. But I wanted to show this to you guys. I'm going to go in here with the vacuum attachment, get some of that out, and I'll even take my lint brush that's got sort of a nice stiff bristle and go in there and try to move some of that out, and we'll get that out with a vacuum. Remember, you always want to clean dust and dirt before you put oil in. Otherwise, you will have a mess. Don't do that to yourself. It's unnecessary, and you will be unhappy. And let's see, we have our table hinge pin set screws are all here. So those look good. And what else? We've got, of course, if we look at this from this side, you'll see that the side plate matches the rear plate in terms of it being, just flat and smooth, very nice. The decals on this machine are pretty nice. There's a little bit of a break on the border on the left front, and that's not unusual because people sewed, the fabric went back and forth. But overall, when you consider how old this is, and I'm going to guess around 1906, 1908, that's pretty darn good. And there's some yellowing, but again, we will save the cleaning part for last. This side plate will come off, and we'll get behind there. So this machine she's dry and dusty. It looks like, maybe she came from somewhere out in the west somewhere, but the machine is just sitting there waiting for us. And oh, by the way, this machine is not unlike the 6699 class in that it needs a case or a table in order to run. You can't sit this particular 15 class machine on your dining table and start sewing. In fact, if you were doing this, you'll notice I've got the machine, I'm turning the hand wheel, and the needle doesn't move, and you may think, oh, there's something wrong with it. Well, not really, because when I lift up and I turn the hand wheel, she spins, right? So we don't have a locked up machine. We have a machine that it can't function properly when it's sitting without support because the drivetrain needs to move. And I can't remember if the later 1591s were tabletop ready. I honestly don't remember, guys. You guys can go behind me and tell me. But I know that, of course, the 185s, the 199s, the 66s, those top-loading bobbin machines, most of them, you've got to have a table or a case. You've got to have something to elevate the bed of the machine so that the drivetrain can move underneath. Speaking of which, I like this decal pattern. Kind of cool. Let's look under on the side, and we will see what you normally see. Nothing of note other than, we got some dust bunnies, which is normal. We'll get all that out. We'll be brushing all of this out again before. But again, as I was mentioning to you guys about restoring a machine, these machines are brutally strong. You can get parts. You have to note, you want to know, we'll look up the serial number and find out the year of the machine because you want to make sure you have the right bobbin case and shuttle hook. The hook, as far as I can tell, the hook looks a little newer than the rest of the machine. That doesn't mean it is. I'm just guessing at this. But she works fine. I can already tell there's a layer of lint right under the feed dogs. Again, that's normal. So we'll be taking the plate off, obviously, and get all that cleaned out. So we're going to have a little dusty period where we clean all this off. And then, yeah, you can see right here the check spring. It's still springy, but the end, the part that we needed, has been broken off. So I'm going to have to order one of those. But here's the thing. If you are trying to figure out what you want to learn to restore sewing machines on, this is a great example of a machine. You can still get parts for it, and they're not expensive. A check spring, I do not expect to pay very much for the check spring, right? I just don't. It's just not... oh, by the way, the plate... I looked in my own parts bin, and I have a plate that fits. However, it's missing the clip, and I don't have the clip underneath, and I don't honestly know if this came off of a Singer 15 or a Japanese copy of one. Now again, it fits here and slides, but I don't have a clip, so when the owner has it, if she was to fold it into the table, this plate will fall off. So, it'd be okay as a stopgap measure, but we can get replacements. Now, they make new replacements for these things, and sometimes they work fine. They don't cost much. They often will fit. However, if you have the option to get a vintage replacement, try that. They don't cost any more really, and I like the vintage parts. The quality is a little better. Granted, this is not a mechanical part. It's kind of just, it's going to slide on with a clip. But anyway, I have one ordered. Actually, I did order one, and it's gone missing. I'm following up with the Postal Service to find out what happened to it. Don't know why anyone would take it, what they would do with it, if they even knew what it was for most folks. Anyway, I'm still going to have to get a plate, and we're going to have to get a spring, check spring. And again, these should be easily available. They shouldn't cost us much. And then we'll get that check spring installed so that we can, when we get the machine ready for the client who owns this machine, it will function properly. And again, we don't need the treadle table. I can set this up to just to test it if I want to. I can raise the bed. I'll come up with something. I think I actually may have a Singer carry case that I can use, just as I can borrow one of my own carrying cases just to sit the machine in so we can get it elevated, and I'll do that later when I go to test its stitching. But again, when you're dealing with a straight stitch vintage Singer, I have seen them locked up, but it's rare. Singer did not use the same close tolerances that some of the other companies in Germany, in Italy did, but that's okay. That's not really a reflection of poor quality. And the good news is, for those of us trying to weight these machines up later, they again, you can find a Singer that's frozen, and I had to fight with one that had a lot of rust in the mechanism and drivetrain. But I think it was that 185. I had to submerge, and oh my gosh, what a chore that was. But that's rare. That's very unusual. But just like most vintage Singers that I have been asked to overhaul, or the ones I've rescued myself, the needle's moving. That doesn't mean everything's perfect, right? You wouldn't want to sew with this machine now. So I ordered the plate just to give you guys an idea of cost, and I had this sent into Ontario from the U.S., and I had to order it. I couldn't find the plate by itself vintage, so I ordered it with another needle plate. The little this one here, this machine has it, and it was $35, I think, $35. And so now I'm having to put in a claim with the postal carrier on that. And I'm going to have to, I don't know that they're going to come up with it and find it. I wish they would, but if not, I have to order it again. But I got to order the spring. So again, we'll get the spring ordered. I don't know if I find another vintage plate, we'll see. I don't want to pay, I want to pay less than $40 for it. There are lots of them floating around out there. And if not, I'll get a new reproduction. The spring, I would be shocked if it cost more than $2. In fact, the shipping of the spring will cost more, than the actual spring does. So again, there you go, guys. This was kind of an introduction to my next project, but it was also to make a video to talk about what is my favorite brand to learn vintage sewing machine restoration, and you are looking right at it. Singer dedicated straight stitch. If this is the 15 class, is one of the best that you can focus on, but if you don't find a 15, or you don't want a 15, Singer 99s, Singer 66s, Singer 185Js, Singer 201s. You'll pay more for the 201s because they have a higher price demand on the market. But again, I would start with any of these Singer dedicated straight stitchers. Save zigzag for later. Now, if you have a zigzag machine you want to learn to restore, awesome, go for it. Don't be afraid. This is not an either or, guys. It's not. I would never say, oh, don't dare try to overhaul a multi-stitch vintage sewing machine. Of course not. At some point, I ended up, going for it and coming up with some courage to come and try it, and I ended up learning how to work on those as well. But if you want to get the quickest reward, You want to start here, right? And don't make assumptions whether it's shiny and clean or whether it's, it's got dust and whatever. Um, you know, these machines, the last thing I'll say with the Singers is Singer, I have only theories as to why this is. Singer designed most of their machines, and I know there are exceptions, but most of their machines were designed to be easily accessible for service. They just were. The first potted motors were not, but the later potted motors on the Singer 300, 400, 500 class, they are a joy to work on. And I can just tell it's just easier to get to stuff most of the time. Like, the screws, and again, if you lose a screw, you can get a replacement. It's just amazing. They made these in the millions, and they're all over the world. This design is everywhere. I think I've mentioned you guys, Singer was one of the very first global corporations. They were all over the planet. And so that's again, that's my opinion. If those of you who work on machines, or maybe you just like to tinker on your own, maybe you have a different opinion. Maybe you think it's no big deal to work on zigzag or machines that even do more than zigzag, like multi-stitch. And also consider working on a treadle. If you want a treadle, or if you know someone who has one, it's not a bad, because you don't have any of the electricals to deal with. You just have your treadle belt. And you have to maintenance your treadle table. A lot of the treadle tables need to be cleaned and vacuumed of dust, and get their mechanisms. The mechanisms down below the big pedal and pulley need to be oiled, etc. But that's not a huge deal. So there you go, guys. This is what I would suggest to you is my favorite machine for people who want to start learning overhauling vintage sewing machines, whether it's treadle or electric. Make it a Singer, make it a dedicated straight stitcher. For those of you who have different opinions, please put your comments below. I'd love to hear. Maybe you can make a case for why. The heck with it. Start with a European multi-stitch machine. Those machines I find the most complex. They can be the most frustrating sometimes, but they are all wonderful. They're all worth it. But when you're starting out, it's nice to have a little reward, to be able to say, by God, I went through this machine, I got it overhauled. And anyway, after 9 years of going through lots of machines, this is what I would recommend. So anyway, thanks for watching. Still looking for parts here, and hopefully we'll get these in, and I can start getting to work on, first of all, getting all the dust and crud out. And we'll be pulling some of these parts off to get them clean. They're going to have to come off, some of them. Depends on which part we're dealing with. And let's get things moving again, get our parts in. And then we'll see. I have to see whether I need to order a new treadle belt or not. I don't know how much treadle belting I have left in my inventory. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate you tuning into my channel here. And if you have not, consider subscribing to the channel. It doesn't cost anything, and you can even set up a reminder. YouTube will notify you if you choose. You click on the little bell symbol when a new video has been uploaded. Anyway, take care, everyone, and we will see you in the next video.